Recently, news of Melbourne's future suburban rail link has increased and is becoming more and more likely that this line is to be built. This line will serve Melbourne's outer suburbs, promoting development away from the city centre and decentralising Melbourne from its CBD. This project is expected to greatly change the way people travel in Melbourne and continue to promote a more public transport-focused travel within the city. However, this project is not the first time a circle line has been attempted. For that, we would have to go back over 100 years to the early days of railways in Melbourne. Our story starts over 140 years ago in the early 1870s. Victoria's railway network was split in two, with the government-operated Victorian Railways operating regional lines to Williamstown, Geelong, Ballarat, Echuca and Wodonga, whilst private enterprise Melbourne and Hobsons Bay United Railway operated the suburban network to Hawthorn, Brighton, St Kilda and Port Melbourne. All Melbourne and Hobsons Bay United Railway lines ran into the city and operated from Flinders Street Station, whilst the Victorian Railways lines operated to Spencer Street Station on the other side of the CBD. On the 2nd October 1873, a new railway construction bill was introduced to the Legislative Assembly of the Victorian Parliament. This bill was for 8 new train lines. These were the Ovens River, Beechworth Railway, Hamilton Railway, Inglewood Railway, Avoca Railway, Colac Railway, Portland Railway, and most important to our story, Gippsland Railway. In the initial proposal, the line was intended to branch off the existing line in Elsternwick, move east through the undeveloped outer regions of the city before passing through Oakleigh, then proceeding through Gippsland and terminating at Sale. The problem was that Elsternwick was on the Brighton Beach line, which was owned by Melbourne and Hobsons Bay United Railway. Negotiations with the company had been initiated earlier in the year, however had broken down by the time of the bill being introduced. Due to this, it was decided that the line would temporarily terminate at Oakleigh, and a connection to the city would be built later. The bill was passed successfully and became Railway Construction Act No. 475. A proposal of 9 possible routes was presented by Victorian Railways Engineer-in-Chief Thomas Higginbotham. 5 of these required the purchase of the Melbourne and Hobsons Bay United Railway Company, and the remaining 4 would bypass the company's lines. One of these was described as follows: the outer circle line from North Melbourne via North Carlton, North Fitzroy, Northcote, Kew, Upper Hawthorn, Boroondara, Gardiner, Caulfield and on to Oakleigh, a distance of 15.2 miles. Higginbotham decided that this outer circle line was the best option, as the cost of purchasing, repairing and extending the existing Melbourne and Hobsons Bay United rail lines would total out to over £15 million, whilst constructing the outer circle line would only cost around £200,000, theoretically saving over £1.3 million. This did not stop the government from trying to purchase the Melbourne and Hobsons Bay United Railway Company on multiple occasions. In 1872, an offer was made for £695,110, which was turned down. Another attempt occurred in 1873, with the price over doubled to £1,320,820. However, the deal still fell through. In October 1873, a group called the Outer Circle Railway League was formed to persuade the public to vote for politicians who supported the Outer Circle plan. The group mainly consisted of members from the northern suburbs interested in finally having a rail line pass through their area. To counter this, the Southern Railway League was formed, wanting a line to run through the existing Melbourne and Hobsons Bay United rail lines into Melbourne. This group was mainly supported by members in the south, who hoped that if the government acquired Melbourne and Hobsons Bay United Railway, they would upgrade the ageing infrastructure operated by the company. Both sides argued fiercely through 1874 and 1875. They held rallies to gain support to get who they wanted in office. The main supporters of the Outer Circle Rail League in the upper house were James Munro of North Melbourne and Francis Beaver of North Yarra. The main Southern Railway House supporter was Thomas Bent of Brighton. At this time, most members of the House were landowners, and in this case for the group, all owned large amounts of land alongside where the line was proposed to go. On December 23, 1874, Duncan Gills, Minister of Railways in Victoria, introduced a bill that included construction of the outer railway line. However, the bill quickly faced immense backlash and did not pass the House. Despite this, a land survey occurred, which changed the route slightly to allow it to pass through Camberwell. 1875 saw the beginning of the end for the Outer Circle plan, with the Creford government being voted out for the new McCulloch government, who had much less favourable views on the idea. By 1876, it had become clear that the government was siding with the Southern Railway League. In November 1876, McCulloch proposed a new railway bill, which included the Elsternwick to Oakleigh Railway, as well as a series of railways from Coburg, Heidelberg and Caulfield to try and please both sides. Despite the attempts to please both sides, the fact that it would still require the purchase of the Melbourne and Hobsons Bay United Railway Company meant that the bill was hotly contested and eventually it was put aside. Despite the Outer Circle line surviving this, the proposal of direct lines from the city to the northern suburbs had caused it to lose support in some of these regions. The Premier once again changed in 1877, with the Berry government entering power. Their Minister for Railways, John Woods, didn't support either the Southern Railway or the Outer Circle, instead opting for a direct line from Oakley to Spencer Street. Running south from Spencer Street across the Yarra, running along the south bank of the Yarra, passing the Botanical Gardens on a bridge, and then going through South Yarra, Prahran, Caulfield and on to Oakley. Due to outcry over a rail line passing around the Botanical Gardens, an amendment was made that made it run along the North Bank, bypassing Flinders Street and running via Jolimont and Richmond, then on to South Yarra. This new proposal had some success, however it started to face trouble in the Upper House. The Upper House attempted to amend the bill, making it pass through the Melbourne Hobsons Bay United Railway Station at Flinders Street, then follow the Melbourne Hobsons Bay United line to Hawthorn. However, Berry was opposed to these changes and tried to reverse them. However, the Upper House did not allow it. Eventually, the line was removed from the bill and it passed the Upper House without issue. Later in 1877, with the Gippsland line practically complete, Berry once again tried to push his direct line through. Once again it ran into difficulty, and once again it was put aside. By this point, the Outer Circle line was practically dead, with meetings of the Outer Circle Railway League becoming less and less frequent. One supporter of the idea that remained was Higginbotham, who was still Engineer-in-Chief of Victorian Railways. He supported the Outer Circle and made numerous attempts to force the line. However, he was repeatedly shut down by the Berry government. Eventually, on the 8th of January 1878, Higginbotham and 136 other government officials were removed from their positions, likely due to their opposition of the Berry government. Shortly after this action, the government reopened negotiations with Melbourne and Hobsons Bay United Railway. Finally, on the 6th of July 1878, both parties agreed to a price of £1,320,820, the same as was offered in 1873. With the company purchased, debates still continued over how to bring the line into the city. Woods once again proposed his direct route, running along the former company lines to South Yarra before branching off and going direct to Oakley. An attempt was made by Bent in the lower house to shift the line south, following the original path from Elsternwick. However, with the Outer Circle out of the picture, most of its supporters shifted to supporting a direct route, and it passed both houses on the 14th of August 1878 as Railway Construction Act No. 604, and opened not long after in April 1879. The rebirth of the Outer Circle came very suddenly in the early 1880s. This time was marked by immense economic growth in the colony due to the booming land market. With this growth also came a new demand for railway, with land prices often greatly increasing with proximity to railways. In 1881, the Berry government, who had killed the original Outer Circle, was voted out in favour of O'Lonan. Under this government, Thomas Bent became the Minister of Railways, and he was eager to expand the colony's railway network. Despite being against the Outer Circle in earlier years, he had now seemingly changed sides, as one of the lines included in Bent's 1882 Railway Construction Bill was the line from Hawthorn to Murrumbeena, which had been advocated for by the reformed Outer Circle League. This, however, proved to be a false start, as the O'Lonan government was voted out of office quickly because of corruption allegations. They were replaced by the Service government, who greatly changed the way the Victorian Railways operated. They weakened the Minister of Railways and created a board for the management of the railways. At the head of this board, they appointed Richard Speight, who gained experience working with the Midland Railway Company in England. Speight's experience proved to work against him, however, as his experience working with the densely populated Midland region of England did not appropriately translate over to the sparsely populated colony of Victoria. Speight quickly made friends with Duncan Gills, the new Minister of Railways, and the two worked together extensively on bills to expand the colony's railway network. This resulted in the Railway Construction Bill of 1884, nicknamed the Octopus Bill. This bill included 65 new lines spread all around the colony. One of these lines just so happened to be the Outer Circle Railway from Fairfield to Oakley. This bill entered the Legislative Assembly on October 7, 1884. It passed with little issue and was able to enter the Legislative Council on November 19th, passing on December 2nd, and finally passed Parliament on December 12, 1884, having only lost 6 lines in the process. It would be over 3 years until work on the Outer Circle began. A contract for the construction of the line was awarded on the 12th of March 1888 to Messrs Graham and Waddick for £125,016. MG&W assigned a new engineer, Mr., later Sir, John Monash. Construction began not long after in May, when the first cuttings began to be dug near Ashburton. Not long after, in October, track laying began near Oakley, and it reached the first station, Waverley Road, in May of that year. Despite the first section of the line being completed, trains would not run along it for more than a year, until March 1890, when the Burnley to Waverley Road line completed construction. On the north side of the line, track laying began in March 1889. However, little progress was made due to delays on the bridge over the Yarra and the Railways Department pushing for an increased focus on the south side of the line. Between September 1889 and April 1890, track laying was conducted along the Waverley Road to Camberwell section of the line. This section opened to traffic on May 30th after a short period of ballasting. The final section of the line, from Riversdale to Fairfield Park, took a while longer to complete. Track laying from Riversdale began in May 1890, however it would take until October to finish the laying, as the viaduct over the Yarra had faced major delays. The rest of 1890 was spent polishing the line, finishing bridges and refining stations. The final section of the line was opened on the 24th of March 1891, 3 years after construction began. The entire construction went off nearly without casualty, except for a pair of workers that drowned in the Yarra at the beginning of 1889. In total, the reported cost of the outer circle amounted to £136,422, alongside a further £297,361,000 spent on purchasing the land along the line. The line begins in the south at Oakley Station. Oakley Station had 2 platforms, one on either side. 3 tracks ran through the station, with one on either side and a centre one for through traffic. Shortly after crossing Warrigal Road, at a level crossing, the line splits into 2, with the outer circle branching north and the main line continuing towards South Yarra and the private Rosstown Railway branching off south. The outer circle continued parallel to the main line on a single track for around 900 metres. At Porth Road, the outer circle began to branch north, away from the main Gippsland line. Here was the location of the first station, Outer Circle Junction. This station was outlined in the original contract, however it soon became redundant and was not actually constructed. In its place, a temporary block post was constructed, only for use during the construction of the line. Initially it operated in September 1889, and then closed till December when it was reopened again. It was once again closed when the line opened for passengers in March 1890 and was dismantled. The line continued north to Dandenong Road, where it passed as a level crossing. Located between Dandenong Road and Waverley Road was our first proper station, Waverley Road Station. Known as Waverley during its construction, Waverley Road Station was located between the level crossings at Dandenong Road and Waverley Road. It had 2 platforms, one serving Outer Circle trains and one serving Burnley trains. Just to the north of the station, a siding was located, which saw little use. Upon its opening, Waverley Road was a staff station. However, after about a year of operating, staffing became less certain. Initially, the Waverley Road crossing was staffed, however it soon became uncontrolled to save cost. At the far end of the station, just after the crossing, the 2 lines diverted, with the Burnley line winding to follow Gardiner's Creek and the Outer Circle line crossing over it. The Outer Circle crossed Gardiner's Creek on Gardiner's Creek Bridge, also known as the Black Bridge, because of its outer coating of black tar. This bridge was a trestle bridge of all timber construction, with 31 spans of 4.5 metres, totalling to about 140 metres. After the bridge, the line enters a cutting for around 600 metres, exiting the cutting and running at ground level for a short distance before entering another cutting on the approach to Ashburton. Ashburton Station was opened under the name Norwood, however was renamed at the end of 1890. It was located just north of the High Street Bridge and consisted of 2 platforms. To the north side of the station a siding was located, which, like Waverley Road, saw little use. Ashburton was staffed for the entire duration that the Outer Circle line was open. After leaving Ashburton, the line continued as a single track through a cutting for a further 1.1 kilometres. At the end of the cutting was Hartwell Station. Hartwell was extremely similar to Ashburton, with 2 platforms. There was also likely a goods siding at the station, however it doesn't seem likely that this was ever used. The line continued at ground level for a further 2 kilometres before the next station, Riversdale, was reached. Riversdale was located just north of Riversdale Road, and at its opening consisted of a dual platform with one serving as an up and one serving as a down platform. On the south side of the station, a single track continues to the south half of the Outer Circle, whilst on the northern section it branches into 2. One of the branches goes to Camberwell, where it was possible to interchange with Lilydale line trains. The other passes under the Lilydale line, heading towards Fairfield Park. Initially, the connection to Camberwell was double track, however was lowered to a single track in 1892 because of lack of use. In 1893, the Downs platform was closed, however it still saw some limited use as a goods siding. The Lilydale line passed over the Outer Circle on a bridge. No station was located here, so direct transfer from the Outer Circle line to the Lilydale line was not possible. On the north side of the underpass, another loop line was constructed to the Lilydale line, this one connecting it east with the intention of bringing firewood from Lilydale to the northern suburbs. However, this never saw fruition, with the loop only being used for ballast trains and occasional special tour trains. A signal box very briefly existed on the connection of this loop to the Lilydale line, however it was closed in 1893, and by that point it was already in disrepair. Just north of the junction, the line enters a cutting and passes below Canterbury Road before entering Shenley Station. Shenley had 2 platforms, however only the east platform was regularly used. Shenley was a very small station, and it saw very little use. After Shenley, the line entered a long cutting, crossed by several steel and brick road bridges. Roads brought over the line on these bridges included Rubens Grove, Montalbot Road, and Bansbury Road. After this, it passes underneath Whitehorse Road before pulling into Deepdean Station. Deepdean Station was located between Whitehorse Road and Abercrombie Street, and on opening it had 2 platforms. A goods platform may have also been provided, however if it was never used. As the line continues, it crosses Burke Road, curves and progresses east. At Normandy Road, we find East Kew Station, yet another dual platform station with a goods siding located to the western end. The line progressed east under High Street and Belford Road in a cutting before meeting Willesmere Road at a level crossing. On the west side of Willesmere Road is Willesmere Station, with 2 platforms. Willesmere was extremely overbuilt for the region it served and practically saw no use. After Willesmere, we reached the River Yarra, which the largest bridge of the line was constructed. This bridge was perhaps the best example of how overbuilt the line was. The bridge was built with space for 2 tracks, with an additional footbridge also included. For a railway bridge that would only end up seeing traffic for barely over 2 years, this was incredibly overbuilt in every aspect. On the north side of the Yarra, the line crosses Heidelberg Road, before entering its last station, Fulham Grange. Fulham Grange was redundant, located less than 700 metres down the line from Fairfield. It consisted of 2 platforms and a gatehouse for the Heidelberg Road crossing, and a small station building. After Fulham Grange, the line pulls into Fairfield Park, where a new platform was built to accommodate traffic for the Outer Circle line. Fairfield Park had a siding, however it was unlikely it was ever used for Outer Circle trains. The first section of the Outer Circle to open was the Oakley to Waverley Road section on the 24th of March 1890. On opening, this section of the line saw 14 trains each way daily, with 6 on Sundays. The trains on this section were hauled by old N-class locos when acquired from the Melbourne Hossers Bay United Rail Company in 1878. These trains hold 2 fixed-wheeled Victorian Railways passenger carriages with a capacity of about 70. The line continued to be operated like this even after the Waverley Road to Camberwell section opened in May. After this time, trains ran from Camberwell to Oakley, with some services being terminated at Waverley Road. When the northern section of the line opened in March 1891, it was operated independently of the rest of the Outer Circle, with trains running from Fairfield Park to Riversdale with the opportunity to exchange with the rest of the Outer Circle at Riversdale. On opening, this section of the line used an L-class locomotive, which carried a single American-style wooden bogie passenger car, which could carry about 60 passengers. This setup only lasted for a few months, however, as the heavy L-class was causing excessive wear on the lighter steel rails of the Outer Circle. Because of this, it was chosen to switch to the lighter M-class, while still maintaining the same carriage setup. This situation was short-lived, however, as the M-class still wore away at the tracks. Because of this, it was chosen once again to downgrade it, this time to a C-class that had also been acquired from Melbourne Hossers Bay United Rail. It is also likely that in this time, the carriages were also downgraded to fixed-wheel carriages, limiting the capacity to only about 30 passengers. With the M-class motor that was operating the northern section of the line now freed up, it was moved to the lower segment, replacing the aging N-class. The northern section of the line continued to fail to live up to expectations, and it was very soon running into demand problems. There simply wasn't the demand along the line for a train to be justified, and it was soon operating at a significant loss. It was because of this that a mere 17 months after initial opening, on October 11th, 1892, the final passenger train ran the full Fairfield to Riversdale line. The next day, on the 12th, in an attempt to cut costs along the line, the train was replaced by a new Rowan rail car. The first of these rail cars was acquired by Victorian Railways from Wilhelm Rowan of Copenhagen and had been operated through the network for several years before the opening of the Outer Circle. Powered by a single steam boiler, this Rowan car was capable of reaching 48 km an hour on a flat grade. Rowan car number 2 was not purchased by Victorian Railways, however it was constructed using a spare boiler that had been provided for the first car. This car was used to haul a fixed-wheel AB carriage with a capacity of 34 people. But not even this could save the northern section of the outer line. As the line continued to fail to turn a profit, on April 12, 1893 it was closed in its entirety. The southern section of the line continued to operate at a decreased capacity for several more years using N and M class locomotives. On December 9, 1895, the section between Ashburton and Oakley closed, leaving only trains running from Camberwell to Ashburton. This final section closed 17 months later in May 1897, and not a single part of the original Outer Circle was left operating. A mere 14 months after its closure, the Outer Circle would see life once again. On July 4th, 1898, the Camberwell to Ashburton section once again saw trains, now in the form of a C-class engine with a single ABAB class carriage. This configuration would only last 22 months, however, until parts of the northern section began to reopen. On the 14th of May, 1900, the Riversdale to Deepdene section of the line was reopened, and this date also saw some other changes. This included the opening of two new stations, East Camberwell and Stanley. East Camberwell was located on the junction between the Lilydale and Outer Circle lines, with two upper platforms and a single lower platform. Stanley was located between Deepdene and Shenley Station, and only had a single platform. Because of East Camberwell's location on the junction of the Outer Circle and the Lilydale line, it was now possible for trains to run the whole Ashburton to Deepdene line, with interchange at the Lilydale line possible at East Camberwell. During this time, the regular engine used was an M-class engine, however nearly every engine saw use on the line at one point. For the carriages used, it was normally a B-class carriage, followed by an ABD guard passenger van. The Outer Circle continued to prove quite uneconomic to run. By mid-1906, the steam engines were replaced by Z-class motor engines, hauling American-type passenger carriages. These lasted for several years, however were replaced once again in June 1910, this time with the F-class motor engines. Over this time, the train would earn the name the Deepdene Dasher. This Deepdene Dasher would continue to run from Ashburton to Deepdene for another 14 years until 1924. By this time, electrification of Melbourne's rail network had fully begun, and Ashburton was now a target. The first electric trains ran the Camberwell to Ashburton section on November 2nd, 1924. These services were run by the swing-door dog box trains. The line to Deepdene never saw enough traffic to justify electrification, so the steam trains would continue, now terminating at Riversdale. Not long after, in February 1925, the northern section of the line was extended to East Coo once again, however it was only for a limited goods service and never saw passengers. Due to low patronage on the remaining portion of the Deepdene Dasher, it would begin to wind down in 1926, with the F-class replaced by two AEC petrol-powered rail motors in August. This operation only lasted a year, however, as the last Deepdene Dasher ran on October 10th, 1927. The East Coo goods line would continue to function for a further 16 years, finally terminating in 1943. This goods train would use an A2 class locomotive, likely the largest locomotive ever used anywhere on the Outer Circle. The south side of the line was more successful, however, maintaining a steady patronage with its electric trains. By 1934, trains began through running to the city, removing the need for passengers to interchange at Camberwell. Eventually, the swing door trains were phased out for the sliding door Tate trains, which would continue to serve the line for decades to come. In 1906, a new station, Hartwell Hill, was opened between Riversdale and Hartwell Station. In 1909, this station was renamed Hartwell, and the old Hartwell was renamed Burwood. In 1908, Golf Links, a station to serve the Riversdale Golf Club, was opened between Riversdale and the new Hartwell. This club would move out of the location in 1927, however the station would remain. In 1936, the station was renamed Willison. In 1948, the line was extended several hundred metres down after Ashburton to a new station called Alamein. This station served a new post-war housing estate and was named after the Battle of El Alamein in Egypt during World War II. The only portion of the northern section to ever open again was a short 500-metre section from Fairfield, which was used by good trains to the Australian paper mill in Alphington. This siding was used to bring coal and paper pulp into the factory. When it opened in 1919, the freight was hauled by steam engines. However, with overhead wiring going in sometime in the 1950s, the steam locomotives were replaced by E and L class electric locomotives. Most of the right-of-way of the Outer Circle has been preserved through parkland and walking trails. Almost all of the track along the line was ripped up and sold during and after the Second World War, and most stations had their buildings removed or were left to rot. The infrastructure that couldn't easily be removed, such as bridges and cuttings, have mostly been preserved. Where the line used to branch from the Gippsland line in the south, a new station is located, named Hughesdale. This station was opened in 1925 and rebuilt as part of the level crossing removal project in 2018. Soon after we reached the first parkland. Almost the entire section from Hughesdale to Waverley Road is the Outer Circle Linear Park, which includes a walking trail and an urban forest. At Dandenong Road, the former level crossing is long gone, and the road has grown to be a massive 6-lane highway, much greater than the unpaved dirt track it was when trains were running over it. At the former site of Waverley Road Station, we find a car park. This car park serves East Melbourne Station on the Glen Waverley line. After the closing of the Darling to Waverley Road section of the line, trains only ran to Darling. However, by 1930, the line had been extended all the way to Glen Waverley. The Black Bridge, which formerly brought trains over Gardner Creek, stood in almost perfect condition for over 4 decades after the line was closed. At the outbreak of the Second World War, however, the government was trying desperately to find a way to gain some money. One way this was done was by disassembling the Black Bridge and selling its wood. By the mid-1940s, the bridge was almost entirely gone, and today nothing remains. The section from Alamein to Gardeners Creek has all been converted to a linear park with extensive seating and foliage. One interesting thing to note about this portion of the line is that despite there not having been tracks here since the 1940s, the overhead wires are still in place. These wires are used to connect the overhead on the Alamein line to the substation at East Melbourne. The only section of the outer circle to still see train is the Alamein line. This line is served by Extrapolis 100 trains, usually in 3-car sets. This line sees roughly 65 trains each way on weekdays, with 58 on Saturdays and 50 on Sundays. This is one of the lesser used lines on the Metro network, however it still sees decent patronage. The entire section of the Northern Line from Riversdale to Willismere has been converted into one long linear park. All of the cuttings and bridges from the original line still remain, with the exception of the High Street Bridge, which was removed when the road was widened. Nothing notable remains of any of the stations along this segment. The least recognisable section of the line is the part from Willismere to Fairfield. Practically all this way is taken up by the Chandler Highway, which even used the original Yarra Viaduct in its early stages. As the highway widened, a new bridge was constructed, however the old bridge still remains alongside it. The former location of Fulham Grange Station is now a gravel field with no clear purpose. Fairfield Station is still open and it remains part of the Hurstbridge line. In present, there is few plans for the future of the Alamein line. I personally find it unlikely that it will receive any major adjustments anytime soon. The most plausible near-term subject I can imagine is the removal of the Riversdale and Prospect Hill Road level crossings. This would require the complete reconstruction of Riversdale Station and is not likely to happen anytime soon, especially given the low patronage of the line. As for extensions, in the long term, I see it likely that it will someday be extended to East Melbourne or even further to Hughesdale. This link would allow for more easily transferring between the Dandenong Group and Burnley Group lines. It is likely that the restoration of this line would spend most of its time as a bridge, as running at the ground level would simply no longer be feasible. By running above ground, it would allow for the line to avoid obstacles such as Gardeners Creek, the Monash Freeway, the Glen Waverley Line, Waverley Road and Dandenong Road. It would also allow for the preservation of most of the existing parkland that occupies the land. This would likely require the rebuilding of Hughesdale and East Melbourne stations. I find it highly unlikely that the northern section will ever be reinstated. It has been so far modified that restoration would be incredibly damaging and expensive. The region is also well served by trams and a demand for the train is simply not present. This conclusion is my final closing thoughts on the on this video. It's the only unscripted part of the video. I just wanted to give my final thoughts, and to be honest, I'm sick of script writing. Really, through what I've shown, you can tell that when it was built, the outer circle was never going to be viable, and by the time that it reached operation, and the depression that came in the 1890s in Victoria due to the crash of the land market, it simply came too late and was just too expensive to maintain by Victorian Railways. If it had been built later, or especially if the northern section had been maintained its restoration through the modern day and not been closed in the 20s, it might have still been a functional line. However, there simply just wasn't the demand for it, and yeah, that's why it closed. I want to give credit for the books I used as research. Most of my information came from a book simply titled The Outer Circle by Birdsell and Herbert. I think that's how you say that. And I also got a bit of information on locomotives and a bit more on the Outer Circle from Victorian Railways to 1962 by Leo J. Harrigan. This video turned out to be a hell of a lot longer than I planned it to be. Initially, the video was going to be like 5-10 minutes. I've only edited it up to like the 4th paragraph so far, 4th card or whatever you call them, but it's probably going to be damn near 30 minutes. I'm not going to do another video this long for a very long time. Oh, this is my first video, but I'm not going to, yeah. So yeah, expect shorter videos. Thank you for listening and watching, if you've gotten this far. Yeah, thanks, bye.